You don't belong in this family, Dylan said, arms folded across his chest like a judge delivering a sentence. He said it with that twisted smile, half smug, half sweet, that I had come to know too well. It was the kind of expression he wore when he thought he'd won. It should have shocked me. But it didn't. Not anymore. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, stunned but quiet, as the words floated in the air like smoke. My mother sat at the table, her teacup balanced in her hand, pinky out, calm as ever. She's right, she said, not even looking at me. And then came my dad. Eyes glued to his phone, barely paying attention. He grunted, yeah, maybe it's better this way. 3 voices. 3 cold cuts. That was it. No argument. No fight. No attempt to soften the blow. I stood there, scanning their faces, searching for any trace of hesitation. Any flicker of guilt. But there was nothing. No tension. No remorse. Just a rehearsed calm, as if this had all been planned in advance. I imagined Dylan practicing his speech in his room, convincing them with that performative charm of his. The same way he'd talked his way out of trouble since we were kids. All smiles, all manipulation. He could sell sand in the desert and make you thank him for it. I was the only one who ever saw through him. Maybe that's why he hated me so much. I guess I'll save you the trouble, I said, grabbing my jacket off the chair. Consider me gone. No one moved. No one tried to stop me. Dylan looked pleased, smiling like he'd finally gotten what he wanted. Mom turned her eyes back to her tea. Dad didn't even glance up. I walked out the front door and pulled it closed behind me. Not a slam. Not a dramatic exit. Just done. Outside, I took a long breath. The air was cold, crisp, and for the first time in a while, it didn't feel suffocating. And the strangest part? It didn't hurt the way they probably expected it to. You see, I wasn't like Dylan. He craved their validation like oxygen. Always fishing for praise, basking in their attention, acting like the golden boy they worshipped. I, on the other hand, had accepted the reality long ago. I was never the favorite. Barely even noticed. At best, I was tolerated. That didn't bother me as much as it used to. I had my own life. My own friends. A steady job. I didn't need their approval. But still, there was a sting. Not from them letting me go, but from how easy it was for them. No second thoughts. No questions. No wait, let's talk about this. Just silence. That night, I stayed with my best friend, Jordan. We sat on her couch, drinking cheap wine and watching some ridiculous reality show. I told her everything. She laughed, eyes wide in disbelief. Your brother actually said that? To your face? Word for word. Jordan shook her head. Honestly? Sounds like you're better off. I clinked my glass with hers. I think so too. But even as we laughed, I couldn't shake the feeling that this whole thing had been calculated. Dylan had been planting seeds for months, little comments to our parents about how I didn't fit in, or how I was different. He didn't just want to be the favorite. He wanted me gone. 2 days later, I came by the house to grab a few things and noticed the suitcases by the front door. I hadn't even known they were planning a vacation. There was Dylan, of course, barking orders and strutting like he owned the place. He told Dad to load the cooler, reminded Mom about sunscreen, and kept glancing at me like he expected a reaction. I stood on the stairs, arms crossed, watching him perform. Finally, he turned to me and smirked. So, you're just gonna sit here all alone while we're off living our best lives? I smiled. Calm. Collected. I knew that would irritate him more than any insult. I hope they take you to a hospital while you're there, I said coolly. Maybe they'll have room for Mom and Dad, too. His face turned red instantly, and just like that, he lost it. Screaming. Tears streaming. It was almost funny. My parents rushed to his side, comforting him like he was the victim. My mother looked at me like I'd just committed some unforgivable sin. "You're so cruel," she said. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" I shrugged. "Because I'd rather be sane." And just like that, they left. No goodbyes. Just slamming doors and silence. For the first time in years, the house was still. It was quiet. Peaceful. Blissful. I curled up on the couch with a bowl of popcorn, turned on my favorite show, and welcomed the solitude. No snide comments. No manipulation. No exhausting power plays. Just peace. And that peace lasted exactly 2 days. On the third morning, while making pancakes, my phone buzzed. It was Dylan. I rolled my eyes and hit ignore. He called again 5 minutes later. And again. And again. By the time I finished eating, I had 7 missed calls. Call 8 finally got an answer. "What?" I said, voice sharp. "I've been calling you for hours," he snapped, clearly panicked. "Because I don't care," I replied. "What do you want?" "We're in trouble," he said. His voice trembled. "In trouble?" I echoed, leaning against the counter. "How shocking." He hesitated. Dylan never hesitated. Which meant only one thing, he was about to lie. "We got robbed," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "You got robbed? On your perfect little vacation?" "Yes," he snapped. "Some guy stole all our money. Mom and Dad are freaking out. We're stuck here." I didn't know who else to call. I grinned. "Why not call Margaret?" He went quiet. "Oh," I said slowly. "You didn't tell her what happened, did you?" "Shut up," he hissed. "This isn't funny." I laughed. "Oh, it's hilarious." There was another pause. Then, "Are you going to help us or not?" I let the question hang in the air. Part of me wanted to say yes, just to see what kind of mess they'd gotten into. But the bigger part, the part that remembered being tossed out like garbage, knew better. "Let me think about it," I said. "In the meantime, maybe one of the locals you love bragging about can help." "Don't," he started yelling, but I hung up. I tossed my phone on the counter and went back to my pancakes, humming softly. Because for once, I wasn't the one begging for a place at the table. After I hung up on Dylan, I put my phone on silent, placed it face down on the kitchen counter, and finished my breakfast like nothing had happened. If he was expecting me to drop everything and come running, he clearly hadn't been paying attention to the last 20 years of our lives. He'd spent his whole life treating me like I was disposable, just a shadow on the wall he could blame things on, mock, or push aside whenever it suited him. And now, suddenly, I was the lifeline? No. Not this time. For the rest of the morning, I played music loud through the house, jazz, then classic rock, then pop I hadn't listened to since high school. I danced while cleaning the kitchen, then curled up with a book in the living room, sun spilling across the couch like a warm blanket. The silence wasn't just peaceful, it was earned. But peace, as always with my family, doesn't last long. By early afternoon, I checked my phone out of mild curiosity. 15 missed calls. 10 from Dylan. 2 from Mom. 1 from Dad, though he had probably dialed me accidentally. The rest were text messages. "Dylan, this isn't funny." "Mom, please pick up." "Dylan, we need your help." "Mom again, we're stranded." "Dylan, call me now." I scrolled through them slowly, not reacting. I could have blocked the number. Could have turned the phone off altogether. But something kept me looking. Not out of concern. Out of curiosity. Like watching the final act of a bad play, just to see how far the actors will go before the curtain falls. Eventually, I listened to the voicemail from Mom. Her voice, soft and desperate. I thought you were better than this. We're your family. I don't know what else to say. I paused, then played it again. We're your family. I laughed out loud. Didn't you say the opposite 2 days ago? I muttered, shaking my head. I typed out a single reply to Dylan. Sorry. I'm just a roommate, remember? Then I turned off my phone. That night, I slept better than I had in years. No guilt. No second guessing. Just the deep sleep of someone who finally realized they don't owe apologies to people who never valued them. By the second day of silence, I started to wonder if they'd given up. Maybe they'd found someone else to clean up their mess. Maybe they were learning what it felt like to be unsupported for once in their charmed, golden child lives. Then, just before noon, my phone buzzed again. This time, just one message from Dylan. We're coming home. Thanks for nothing. I stared at it for a second. No threats. No begging. Just bitterness. I didn't respond. Instead, I went about my day. Grocery shopping. A long walk. A trip to the bookstore. All those quiet little things I never used to get time for when the house was filled with shouting, passive aggression, and walking on eggshells. When I got home that evening, I knew they were back. Not because I saw them, because I heard them. Car doors slammed in the driveway. My mother's shrill voice echoed through the neighborhood as she barked about luggage. My dad muttered something about traffic and prices. And then Dylan, loud, dramatic, stomping up the front porch like he was the lead actor in some emotional monologue. I didn't even bother to get up. I stayed seated on the couch, flipping through a magazine, waiting for the explosion. Sure enough, the front door burst open. Dylan marched in, red-faced and fuming. Behind him trailed Margaret, his wife, dragging 2 overstuffed suitcases with a sigh that said she was used to this nonsense. Margaret nodded at me as she passed. Just a small nod. But it meant something. Of all the people in this dysfunctional circus, she was the only one who seemed grounded in reality. Maybe because, unlike the rest of them, she didn't grow up in the delusion. Then Dylan turned to me, eyes wild. You're unbelievable, he snapped, pointing a finger like it was a weapon. We needed you. And you ignored us. I leaned back against the wall, arms folded, unbothered. I'm sorry, I said flatly, with zero sincerity. Didn't know roommates were expected to fund each other's vacations. My dad glared. This isn't a joke. We were stranded. In a foreign country. Humiliating, my mother added. Humiliating? I repeated. Like being told I had no place in my own family? The room went quiet. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she had nothing to say. Dylan, however, paced like a caged animal before snapping again. You're so immature. Do you even care how much stress you caused us? I stared straight into his eyes. No. I don't. Because none of you have ever cared about me. I let the words settle like dust in the air. All you've ever done is tear me down, I continued. You treat me like a spare part until you need something. And now? You want my help? Too bad. I'm done. Silence again. Then Margaret's voice, calm but steady, cut through the tension like a blade. He's right. Everyone turned to look at her. What? Dylan barked. Margaret stood still, her arms crossed. He's right, she repeated. You treat him like garbage, Dylan. And you expect loyalty in return. That's not how relationships work. Not family. Not anything. Dylan looked like he'd been slapped. I can't believe you're taking his side. I'm not taking sides, Margaret said. I'm telling the truth. And maybe if you respected him, even a little, you wouldn't be in this position now. And just like that, I felt it, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Validation. Someone, finally, saw me. Of course, it didn't last. My dad, always the one to avoid confrontation, raised his hands. Okay. That's enough. We've all had a rough week. Let's just move on. Move on? I said, grabbing my backpack off the couch. Sure. Let's move on. In fact, let's move on for good. Mom frowned. What do you mean? I'm moving out, I said. Tonight. And I'm not coming back. Dylan rolled his eyes. Oh please, you've said that before. This time I mean it. And I did. I walked upstairs, left them in silence, and started packing. Because sometimes the only way to heal is to finally walk away and never look back. I left that night. No dramatic farewell. No long speeches. Just packed my bags in silence, zipped them up, and called the only person in my life who had never once made me feel like I was the problem, my grandmother, Ruth. She answered on the second ring, like she had been waiting. Come stay with me, she said. You don't owe them a thing. I didn't argue. I didn't hesitate. By morning, I was gone. Her house sat on the edge of Mitchellstown, a quiet little town with tree-lined streets, neighbors who said hello, and the kind of silence that felt like healing. The moment I stepped inside her cottage, warm walls, soft lighting, the smell of cinnamon and cookies, I felt like I could finally breathe. You're better off without them, she said as she handed me a plate of her famous molasses cookies. Stay as long as you need. And for the first time in weeks, I believed her. The next 2 days were the kind of peace I'd always dreamed of. No backhanded comments. No walking on eggshells. Just me, a cup of coffee, and my thoughts. I caught up on sleep, helped Grandma with the garden, and even cracked open the old sketchbook I hadn't touched in years. It was the first time I remembered who I was when I wasn't constantly trying to prove my worth. Then the call came. Unknown number. Twice in a row. At first, I ignored it. Scam likely, I assumed. But when it rang a third time, something in my gut told me to answer. Hello? A man's voice is firm, professional. Is this Caleb Simmons? Yes, I said cautiously. Who's asking? This is Detective Perkins with the county police. We're following up on a complaint involving your family. My blood ran cold. A complaint? I asked. What kind of complaint? There's been a report filed by your brother, Dylan Simmons, the detective said evenly. He claims that you threatened his safety prior to his family's vacation. I'd like to ask you a few questions. For a second, I thought I misheard him. Threatened his safety? I almost laughed. That's ridiculous, I said. I've never laid a hand on him in my life. I understand this is upsetting, the detective replied. But we take all reports seriously. Can you come into the station tomorrow morning? Yeah, sure, I muttered, still reeling. I'll be there. After we hung up, I sat frozen at the kitchen table, staring at the wall. Grandma came in with a fresh pot of tea, took one look at me, and set it down slowly. What happened? I told her everything. Her response was immediate and fierce. That boy has no shame. But don't you worry, Caleb. He doesn't have a leg to stand on. The next morning, we went to the station together. Detective Perkins was younger than I expected, sharp-eyed, but kind. He offered me coffee, then walked me through the process. It was clear from the start that something didn't add up. He said you threatened physical harm, the detective explained. But when we asked for details, his story kept changing. He couldn't provide any evidence. No witnesses. No text messages. Nothing. Because it didn't happen, I said flatly. He nodded. Honestly, it looks personal. Like retaliation. I leaned forward. Are you dropping the case? We are. There's no legal basis to pursue it. But I'll tell you this, people like your brother, they don't give up easily. You might want to keep your distance. I thanked him, relieved and angry all at once. Dylan's behavior had always been toxic, but this? Filing a false report to try and damage my record? That was next level. We returned home, and for the first time since the call, I felt safe again. Until Grandma handed me a letter. This came for you while we were out, she said, placing the envelope gently in my hand. There was no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Handwritten. I need to talk to you. It's important. Please call me. Margaret. I stared at the note, heart racing. Why would Margaret reach out to me? What could be so important that she'd risk contacting me behind Dylan's back? Part of me wanted to crumple the letter, toss it into the trash, and walk away. But something about it, something in her writing, felt desperate. So, I called. Thank God, she whispered when she picked up. I didn't know if you'd even read it. What's going on? I asked, my voice tight. More drama? It's Dylan, she said. Her tone was tense. He's hiding something. Something big. And I don't know who else to turn to. I blinked. What do you mean, hiding something? I can't say over the phone, she said. But it's bad. Please. Can we meet? I almost said no. After everything that had happened, the last thing I wanted was to be dragged deeper into Dylan's chaos. But the fear in her voice wasn't fake. It wasn't about manipulation. It was real. Fine, I said. Where? We agreed to meet the next morning at a diner off the highway. Neutral ground. Public. Safe. When I walked in, Margaret was already seated in the back booth, nursing a cup of coffee, eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. She looked exhausted. Pale. Anxious in a way I'd never seen before. I sat down across from her. She wasted no time. Dylan lied to everyone, she said in a low voice. About the robbery. About the vacation. About everything. I stared at her. You'll have to be more specific than that. She leaned closer. The robbery? It wasn't random. I blinked. What? He planned it, she whispered. He staged the whole thing. I blinked at Margaret across the diner table, unsure if I heard her right. He staged it? I repeated slowly. She nodded, eyes wide, voice barely above a whisper. The robbery. It wasn't some random guy. It was someone Dylan knew. He planned the whole thing. I leaned back in the booth, processing her words. Why? What possible reason could he have to fake getting robbed? Margaret took a deep breath, like she'd been holding this in for far too long. Money, she said. And attention. That whole trip was a setup. He told me it was a test to see if you'd come crawling back after being kicked out. But when you didn't, he panicked. He wanted to create a crisis that would force you back in. I stared at her, stunned. He orchestrated an entire robbery just to, what? Humiliate me? Control you, she corrected. Pull you back into the family orbit. Make you feel guilty. Make you feel responsible. The coffee in my mug had gone cold, untouched. My hands curled into fists on the table. He told Mom and Dad it was some street thief. Swore up and down it was just bad luck. But I overheard him talking to someone on the phone 2 nights before it happened. He was giving them the room number. The time we'd be out. I shook my head. That's insane. That's criminal. I know, she said, her voice breaking. And I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure what to believe. But after he filed that false police report against you? I knew something was really wrong. I clenched my jaw. He's spiraling. She nodded. I think he always has been. But it's getting worse. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clinking of forks and the low murmur of conversations around us filled the silence. Then I asked the question I'd been avoiding. Why are you telling me all this? Margaret looked at me with something between shame and courage. Because I don't want to be part of it anymore. And I think you're the only person who'll believe me, and maybe help stop it before it gets worse. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. You know they'll never believe you. Mom and Dad? They'd rather blame me than face the truth about their golden child. I know, she said. But I'm done enabling him. There was steel in her voice now. Real conviction. And something else too, fear. Is he violent? I asked carefully. She hesitated. Not yet. But he's unpredictable. When things don't go his way, he lashes out. The way he talks about you, Caleb, it scares me. I looked out the diner window. Gray skies. A storm coming. So what do you want to do? I asked quietly. Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a small USB drive. She placed it on the table. I recorded the phone call. The one he made to the guy who robbed us. I didn't even mean to, it was through a Bluetooth speaker. But I saved it. My eyes widened. You have proof? She nodded. Have you gone to the police? Not yet, she said. I wanted to come to you first. I stared at the drive. That tiny piece of plastic and metal felt heavier than it looked. It was evidence. It was leverage. It was a truth bomb that could finally blow the whole twisted facade apart. But it also came with a cost. If I used it, if I took it to the police, there'd be no coming back. No pretending this was just family drama. No playing the forgive and forget game my parents loved so much. This would be nuclear. You don't have to do anything, Margaret said gently, sensing my hesitation. I just couldn't carry this alone anymore. I pocketed the USB without a word. That night, back at my grandmother's, I sat at the kitchen table with the drive in front of me. I hadn't told her yet. I wasn't ready. Not until I figured out what I was going to do. Part of me wanted to burn it. Throw the USB in the fireplace and pretend I never heard any of it. That would be the easy thing to do. Just walk away like I had before. But another part of me, one that had been stepped on, gaslit, ignored, and cast aside for years, wanted justice. I'd always tried to take the high road. Always been the quiet one. The peaceful one. The one who let things slide, who smiled through betrayal and swallowed every insult. But not anymore. I picked up my phone, stared at the screen, then opened my voice memo app. I hit record and began talking, not for anyone else to hear, but for myself. My name is Caleb Simmons. And for the first time in my life, I'm not going to protect people who hurt me. My hand trembled slightly, but I kept going. I have evidence that my brother, Dylan, staged a fake robbery during our family vacation. I was accused of threatening him, a false police report, filed out of spite. This ends now. I saved the memo and sat in silence for a moment. Then I called Detective Perkins. He picked up after 2 rings. Simmons? I need to come in, I said. I have something you're going to want to hear. The next morning, I returned to the station with the USB drive in my jacket pocket. My grandmother offered to come with me, but I told her no. This was mine to face. Detective Perkins listened to the recording in a private room. I watched his face carefully. The change was subtle, but unmistakable, the tightening of his jaw, the narrowing of his eyes. When the call ended, he leaned back in his chair. Well, he said slowly. That explains a lot. I nodded. What happens now? We'll open an investigation. Quietly, for now. If this is as legitimate as it sounds, and it is, your brother's going to have a lot to answer for. He paused. Do you want to press charges? I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, but because the weight of what that meant was still sinking in. I don't know, I admitted. But I do want the truth out. That, he said, we can do. When I got back to my grandmother's house, Margaret was waiting on the porch. She looked nervous, hands shoved into the pockets of her cardigan, eyes darting to the driveway every few seconds. You told them, she asked. I nodded. It's in motion. She let out a long breath, part relief, part fear. He's going to lose it when he finds out. Let him, I said. He's crossed too many lines for too long. Margaret looked at me, something like gratitude in her eyes. I know we haven't always talked much. But, thank you. For believing me. For doing something. I gave a tired smile. Thank you for finally saying what no one else ever would. She nodded. I'm going to pack a bag. Stay with a friend for a while. That's a good idea. Before she turned to leave, she looked over her shoulder and said quietly, whatever happens next, you did the right thing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I regretted anything. But because I knew this wasn't the end, only the beginning. When someone like Dylan loses control, they don't go quietly. He would lash out. He'd twist the story. Paint himself as the victim, like he always did. And my parents? They would believe him. Of course they would. They always had. He was their golden boy. But this time, I had proof. This time, the truth had a voice. Mine. And I wasn't going to be silent anymore. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. 3 days after I handed over the USB recording, I got a call from Detective Perkins. He sounded more serious than usual. We brought your brother in for questioning, he said. He denied everything at first. Then, when we played the tape, he cracked. My pulse quickened. What happens now? We'll be charging him with filing a false police report, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction. It's not going to be easy for him. A part of me should have felt triumphant. Vindicated. But all I felt was tired. What about my parents? I asked. Do they know? He sighed. We didn't contact them yet, but I imagine he will. And oh, he did. That same evening, I got a knock on my grandmother's door. It was nearly dark, and I was just about to sit down for dinner. When I opened the door, I found my mother standing there, arms crossed, face stormy. We need to talk, she said. I stepped aside, not out of politeness, but to get it over with. She walked in like the house belonged to her, ignoring my grandmother sitting in the kitchen. Her eyes burned with something between disbelief and rage. You went to the police, she said, no preamble. Yes, I said. Because your son committed a crime. He's your brother, she snapped. I looked her square in the eye. And I'm your son. But that's never seemed to matter. Her mouth opened, then closed. No words. Do you know what he did? I continued. He planned a fake robbery. Lied to you. Dragged Margaret into it. Filed a false report against me, hoping to ruin my life. And you still defend him. He made a mistake, she whispered. No, I said, my voice steel. He made a choice. Over and over again. And so did you. The room fell silent. Then, from the kitchen, my grandmother's voice rang out softly. You should go now, Helen. Caleb's done nothing wrong. My mother turned, shocked. You're taking his side? I'm taking the truth's side, Grandma replied. With nothing left to say, my mother turned and walked out. That was the last time I saw her. Dylan, on the other hand, wasn't done. Over the next week, he sent me message after message. First came the insults. The threats. Then, the apologies. You've ruined my life. You'll regret this. Please, let's just fix this. I didn't respond to any of them. Margaret moved out the same week. She stayed at a friend's for a while, then filed for divorce. She and I never got close, not after all this, but there was a quiet respect between us now. We had both survived the same storm. Word spread quickly. The family circle, the aunts, cousins, uncles who had always bought into Dylan's charm, started to turn. They weren't calling to check on me, but they weren't defending him either. That was enough. One afternoon, I walked down to the lake near Grandma's house. It was quiet, with just the sound of birds and the wind through the trees. I sat on a bench with a notebook in hand, not sure what I wanted to write. Just that I needed to say something. I thought about everything that had happened. All the times I let things slide. All the moments I let myself be treated like I was optional. Invisible. And I realized something. I hadn't just walked away from my family. I had walked away from the belief that I owed them something just because we shared DNA. What I owed was to myself. To protect my peace. To demand respect. To choose freedom. Weeks passed. Life settled. I got a new job in town, something quiet and steady. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. Grandma let me turn the shed into a small studio. It smelled like sawdust and sunlight. I began to rebuild, not a home, not a family, but a sense of self. One evening, I received a letter. No return address. Inside was a card. I know you'll never forgive me. But I do love you. I just didn't know how to show it. I'm sorry. Dylan. I read it once. Then I folded it, placed it in a drawer, and left it there. Forgiveness might come. Or maybe it wouldn't. But either way, I didn't owe him closure. He had made his choices. So had I. The final time I visited the house we grew up in, it was empty. On the market. My parents had moved to another state. Dylan's name never came up. It was like they were trying to bury the past under fresh paint and new furniture. Let them. I walked through the rooms one last time. The living room, where Dylan always had the remote. The kitchen, where my words were ignored. The hallway, where I first learned how silence could hurt more than shouting. Then I stepped outside. And didn't look back. I live my life differently now. No longer waiting for approval. No longer giving second chances to people who only want control. I've created my own version of family, friends who check in without wanting something. A community where I'm not just tolerated, but seen. I used to think walking away from your family was the ultimate betrayal. But now I know, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is leave.